Hi guys, this is Achilles 157. I'm making a guide to 200 no limit flooring. The first video in the series is going to be 100 big blinds, and we're just going to go over a few of the concepts that you're going to see in the video and also talk about some additional things in this PowerPoint presentation. If you are bored with the PowerPoint, like I always get bored watching some PowerPoints, I suggest just skipping ahead to the action. I explain most of this stuff in the video, but some of it I do not. First off, regulars will be at 200 no limit. They're often watching all these videos and they're seeing people like 3-bet and 4-bet bluff and check raising with like air and like doing all these fancy plays, and then they'll go and sit down and play poker and actually misinterpret the aggression that you give them without any history. So without any reads or without even playing, they're gonna just as like a standard play against you until they realize otherwise. They're going to be 3-bet bluffing you, they're going to be shoving over your 4-bets slightly, and not giving your raises much respect post-flopper. They're going to be calling you down late. They're going to be assuming that you're going to double barrel bluff them, and maybe even assuming that you're going to be triple barreling some boards. So my point is that realize this and don't make the same mistake. Until you get a solid read on somebody or receive the necessary information, don't make these fancy plays, and just play pretty ABC until you really understand how someone's game is working. And also realize that a lot of the regulars, not some of the good regulars, but most of the regulars, like 90% of the regulars, are going to be playing too aggressive, and they're going to misinterpret your aggression, making these large assumptions without information. Next, we talk about elasticity. And the term elasticity comes from economics, where they talk about demand elasticity. And what that means is how sensitive a consumer is to change in price. So if consumers would normally buy 5 oranges for $1, but if you raise the price from $1 to $2, and they're only going to buy now like 2 oranges, that means that their demand is pretty elastic. They're pretty sensitive to change in price. But if we were to sell consumers oxygen, if we controlled the world's supply of oxygen and were to sell them that, if we changed our price by even 100%, they would still have to purchase the same amount of oxygen from us, so that they would have a very, very, very inelastic demand for that oxygen. Now this translates over to poker when we talk about opponents' calling ranges. Now, if someone's calling range is very elastic, that means that the frequency to which they call your bets is going to be very, very sensitive to the sizing of your bet. That is, if you min bet, they're going to be calling you with almost all of their range, and if you bet half pot, they're going to call you with a lot less than that, and then if you bet full pot, they're going to call you with even less than that. But if their range is very inelastic, then it doesn't really matter how much you bet, they're still calling you with the same frequency. Now this is very important, because when you have a very, very strong hand and your opponent's range is very, very inelastic, then you can bet very, very close to pot and win an extra 10, 20% of the pot, instead of not thinking about their range and just standard betting like 65% on the river. And the same goes for bluffing when someone has an elastic range, so you can save money. Next one you'll see in the video, we're going to go over hand range analysis and basic standard stuff, looking at the hands that are contained in someone's value range versus the hands that are contained in their bluffing range, and trying to figure out how large each of these spaces is, and then determining whether we should call or fold. And then along the same lines, you have polarization versus linear ranges, and this occurs when someone's value range is super, super narrow, so that their bet basically is very, very polarized. It includes the top of their range, the very top of the range, and all their bluffs, which are the very bottom of the range. But if their range is very linear, they should have a pretty wide value range, and these are important things to consider when deciding whether or not you want to call or fold to a river bet, or even turn and flop bets. Next, we're going to talk about statistics. And this is pretty fundamental concept that a lot of live players screw up. Like one time I was playing live and someone said, how likely is it for us to both have top pair in this hand? After like I bet the river with ace king and he called with king 10 and was out kicked. But it has nothing to do with like pre-flop dealing out 2 random cards and then putting out a random board and seeing if 2 people have top pair. It's the conditional probability. It's the probability of us both having top pair given, I raised pre-flop and you called and I bet the flop and check the turn and then bet the river. And it's given that stuff. So when we look at statistics and you see someone is like betting the flop 100% of the time, and then you go to a flop that's 5 ways on like the 10, 8, 6, like 2 diamonds and stuff. If you have the nuts on that flop and you're out of position, don't assume that the player is going to c-bet until like 4 or 5 people there, because the stats that you're reading aren't conditioned on him seeing the flop with 4 other people or seeing that flop necessarily. They're conditioned on the flops that he saw over that sample size. So don't misinterpret your statistics and always think about what they actually mean instead of what they appear to mean. Now we're going to get right into the video, so hope you enjoy the action. Okay, so here's the action. Before I get going, we're just going to go over where the stats are and who they belong to. So in this bottom right table, table 6, we have these stats belong to Odin, these stats to Gyra, these to the short stacker, and then Derek here. I'm Skitty, Racer, myself, and Shaker, and Big Shrimpin'. And they're pretty self-explanatory. Fold to c-bet, c-bet, steal, fold to 3-bet, and 3-bet. Alright, so play. The first thing is that these tables, they're all only 100 big blinds deep. So you're not going to see me opening the same hands that I would at a 200 big blind table. You're going to see me playing a lot tighter than my normal stats. I think I run at like 19, 14 or something when I play flooring. I'm not big on checking my stats after sessions or even after months, but I think that's pretty close. And I usually play a lot of deep tables, and I'm opening a lot, trying to play a lot of pots in position against fish, and just playing a lot of pots in general. And I feel that it's a profitable strategy for me, and that people aren't going to be able to profitably call me when they should, and they're going to be folding the best hand often enough. It's pretty easy at 1-2 to run people over and to pick up information on these players. They play very straightforwardly. They define their ranges for you, and they make ergacious assumptions. Here, I'll get back to that. So I opened 8-5 suited, which is pretty loose, but these players are all full stacked, and there's like a fish or someone half stacked. But I'm going to always be c-betting this flop and just repping the ace. I don't think you need to bet that big. But then I'm going to also fire this turn because I think that Gyra is check calling me with hands like pocket sixes and under pairs to the ace a lot. And he's going to be folding a lot to a turn bet. I probably would not have fired the river had he called, because I also think that being is that he only 3-bets 3%, that he would flat a hand like ace queen and ace king. And a lot of the time when he calls in the turn, I think that ace queen and ace king are a big portion of his range, and I think that he's checking both of them to me on the river. Well, back to the mistakes that people make, these giant mistakes. People assume, without even having history against you, that like you're crazy, spewy, aggressive player because you're a regular, and I guess I get more of it because I'm playing like 19% of my hands and raising a lot of opens. But without even having history against some of these players, they're like 4-betting and getting it in with like ace king against me, when they probably shouldn't be doing that unless they know that I'm like shipping it lightly on them, or even 3-betting a lot, which against people without any information against people where I don't have any information, I'm probably not 3-betting them that late. So you get in a lot of solid spots. Now Brandon's on 3 tables and he's playing 50-cent dollar as well, so I think the best line here is to just bet, and I think betting big on this turn is good. He's not folding any pair and a flush draw that he called with on the flop, because that 6 improves a lot of their hands. He's also going to improve to 2 pairs some of the time. And we also don't expect him to fold a queen ever. So I think just betting big is the best play there. And also post-flop, when people haven't had much history against you and you check raise a flop, that's on a pretty dry board. They're not going to give you any credit, even though you haven't given them any reason yet to not give you credit. So it's just they're making these assumptions without getting the necessary information first, and it's pretty easy to play against after a while. I wouldn't mind a 3-bet with King 7 suited here against him, but it's the concept that I just said. Like, I don't have any information against poker, and it appears he's playing like a solid tag style, but just because I have no information about him besides the fact that I think he's from Greece, I would like to 3-bet someone with a stronger hand the first time I'm going to 3-bet them. Normally when a 50 big blind stack opens, you don't want to flat hands like pocket sixes, just because they don't have enough implied odds. You're not gonna take away 100 big blinds from them, even if they're raising pretty tightly under the gun. But because Mr. Sale B got in the pot, I feel like I'm getting better direct odds, and he's also not that solid, so I could outplay him a lot post flop. Now here I decide to 3-bet poker, and like for the reason I said about King 7 suited, I think this is a mistake. I don't like this. I just have no idea right now how often he's defending 3-bets. So I don't know whether or not he's check calling here with pocket 8s or pocket 9s, or check calling here with king, queen, ace, king, aces, queens, jacks. Like, I just don't have any idea how he's going to react to my c-bet. Now, given that I did 3-bet, I like c-betting because some of the time he's going to be one of the people that just spews pre-flop and is calling here with like garbage and is going to check fold a lot. And then I would not ever want to bet that turn, because the same hands that he's calling with on the flop are definitely playing back on the turn. And I'm going for a bet on this river, and I absolutely hate it. I think that a lot of the time he has ace-king. I think that he also can have a queen that he's checking and hoping that I value bet a king. I just dislike this bet a lot, and he shoves and I have to fold. Let's rewind though, because there's this pocket sixes hand that I forgot what's going on. So Mad Dog Man raises and I flat pocket sixes. I think betting this flop would be a pretty big mistake, because there are just a lot of hands that have a lot of equity that can peel you here. And even though it would be for protection, Mr. Sale is gonna like peel you lightly most likely, or check call with king jack. And you also don't know how often Mad Dog Man is check raising this flop. And it could be pretty often, given that he only has 50 big blinds. But on the turn when we hit a set, we really expect Mr. Sale to lead out a flush draw on the flop to try to take it down and to be aggressive with a flush draw like every other regular in this game. So we're not going to raise. Oh wait, let me rephrase that. We're not going to raise, not because we expect him to lead out a flush draw, but just because we don't expect to get called by much worse. There aren't a lot of value hands in his range that are going to call us when we raise there, because he's going to put us on a flush. He doesn't know that we're not. He's not going to think into the situation about Achilles would have bet the flop with a flush draw, Achilles is bluffing, etc., etc. And I wouldn't even have much reason to bluff him here. The only conceivable bluff hand I could have is ace of hearts or something like that. But on the river, this is incredibly scary bet, because he typed in 63.75. And then here, I was timing down, and initial thought was to fold because I thought he had a flush a lot of the time. But then I also thought that he should be leading out on the flop with his flush draws a fair amount of the time, so that cuts down on the number of combinations of flushes he has on the river. And then I also figured that sometimes he's going to check a hand like King 10 on the flop. He's also going to have like 6, 9, or maybe even like bottom set, or a hand like pocket queens or jacks or something, even though he should be protecting those hands in the flop. I just thought that there was enough of his value range that I could call, and of course he's just going to be spaz bluffing sometimes. And I end up calling and getting pretty lucky that he decided to spaz bluff. And here against this short stacker, whom I loathe because short stackers are fucking evil, I was just about calling here. Overs and an open-ended straight draw and ace high and stuff. Just enough equity. And the times that I bust the short stacker, it makes me very happy. So I can play more profitably when I'm playing other pots, because I hate short stackers. Then it makes me really happy, even though I'm only winning like $36. It just makes me happy to bust them. But I lost, and now he's probably gonna leave, which is also good. And I folded 10-4 suited on the button over here, and I don't really like that. I think I should just always be raising that. I can play 10-4 suited in position against Big Shrimpin or Shaker all day long and be extremely happy about it. There are just going to be too many turns and rivers that I'm going to be able to take them off the best hand, and I just feel like in position I'm going to also be able to value bet them to death, and that they're just going to be making mistakes against me. Here, okay, so I flatted, and then when we get to the flop, he donks out here. I think against him, because he's only raising 3% of hands, I elected to fold here. And I think that's pretty solid. If you assign him like the top 3% of hands, he's going to have a lot of hands like pocket eights, pocket nines, pocket jacks, pocket queens, pocket kings, aces, ace king, ace queen, maybe ace jack. But against that range, and when we get to showdown, we don't have very much equity. Like, the times that he hits a pair or whatever on the turn of the river with ace king or ace queen, he's going to take the pot away from us. And the only way to prevent that would be like raising the flop, but a lot of time we're going to be raising into the nuts because he has aces and kings and queens so often. So, I mean, yeah, I think folding pocket sevens there is good against that type of player. So here is pocket fours and just standard c-bet repping the ace. We probably don't expect him to fold a 10 too often. So against a player, maybe not necessarily Melo 44 because I don't have that many hands on him, but some players are going to be calling this flop with like king jack or king queen or jack 10, etc. Against those types of players, I don't mind a double barrel. They're also going to be folding like, they might even fold a hand like ace 5 suited or something like that. But then once we check the turn, when the board is that drawy, I don't think that he's going to give us credit for a hand like ace queen or ace jack or something on the river. So I just decided to give up the pot. People these days haven't been giving much credit at all to bet check bet lines. They seem to be amazing for value lately just because people figured out that, you know, we want to get money in when we have top pair, and we're going to be betting flop and turn with it, also to balance against our double barrels. So I think they just decided to call. It might be a good idea, and I know I've worked this into my game lately, checking back a lot of medium strength hands to try to strengthen your bet check bet line, and just get value more times. I know it weakens my double barreling range, and I actually consequently have to stop double barreling as often, but I've had some pretty good success with it. It just, people don't like folding rivers after you check the turn. The only time it gets bad is if you're playing against someone that's going to be peeling the flop incredibly lightly with all sorts of draws and stuff like that. Allowing them to see a free river is not a good idea, and you want to be betting the turn with all of your like stronger hands for protection and for value. If this fish here had more money, I imagine I would have called here with King Jack suited, but being as it only is $20, I'm essentially playing out of position against DJ Chris New. Although I get the added bonus of having him define his range because he's playing against a $20 stack. But I'm just not gonna win very many big pots. Now here, Holy Poker, he's seen me 4-bet bluff before, and I know he's 3-betting a really high percentage of the time from the button. So I decided to go for the 4-bet and call it shove, hoping that he would think that I'm bluffing here. Turns out he folded, which didn't make me too happy because it could have meant that the times he was shoving were going to be times that he has a really big hand. So I would have ran into the nuts a lot of the time when I was calling there. But given the read that I had at the time, I don't think that it was going to be that bad of a mistake in hindsight. But in general, at these 1-2 full ring games, people are going to give you a ton of respect if you cold 4-bet. I don't see many people cold 4-bet bluff. Many regulars, that is. There are fish that will do it, but I don't see many regulars cold 4-bet bluff, and for that reason, you're just going to get a ton of respect. So that's an argument against cold 4-bet bluffing. I mean, cold 4-betting there with ace-king suited. And it's just, he's going to be folding way too often. And then here with pocket eights, I do have a gut shot, but it's just not going to be enough equity against his range. I'm going to have to take the pot away. I'm going to have to bluff the turn of the river to win that pot enough to justify calling the flop, so I just folded. And then here against Angry Chinese, who's limp calling a ton, I think, just betting like $12 in position is going to get him to fold a lot. And then here against Slevin Clever, I attempted to go for the bluff, repping the jack to try to get him to fold a hand like king, queen, or ace, queen, or like ace, 10. And I think it's close. But if doing that, I expected him to have queen, jack, jack 10, like jack 9 type hands in his range a lot. So I expected it to not work some of the time. But I thought that it was going to be a good bet at the time. And it turns out he probably had a jack and raised a turn with it. And that sucks, because I had to fold. But I wasn't going to win at showdown anyway. And then here, I don't think the short stacker is doing that with a hand like ace 9. Or a hand like pocket 9s or pocket 8s. So I think that I'm either like way behind against like jacks, queens, kings, or I'm like flipping with ace king, and I didn't want to get in against him without more information about his tendencies. And just in general, as short stackers build up their stack, they get really, really, really tight. So just tighten up against them in response. And here against Angry Chinese, it's the same thing. I expect him to fold a lot of the time. but I'm obviously just going to bet 3 streets for value with pocket kings there. If he check raised me, I probably would have called instead of putting it in. Just to try to, if he was bluffing, to try to get him to bluff the turn. If the board had been Jack 9-5 with 2 diamonds, I would lean towards bet 3 betting for value to try to stack all of his jacks. But he is gonna have a 9 some of the time when he check raises, so I want to allow him to keep bluffing if that is the case. And also, if he has a jack, the 2 9s actually add to the amount of protection my hand has, because if he has a hand like queen jack and he turns the queen, I'm still have a higher 2 pair against him. So that's just like a subtle difference that I think I would explain there. But I wouldn't fault anyone for shoving on the Jack 9-9 either, because he's going to have a hand like Ace Jack a lot, and you're going to win, but he's probably not folding a flush draw if he check raises it either. So here with Ace King, I think betting big on this flop is really good, because this is a spot where their calling ranges are incredibly inelastic. If they're calling here with an ace, they're not like going to choose to fold when you bet 16 versus 14. And the same thing with King Queen. And the same thing with Jack 10 even. If they're going to call 14 with Jack 10, they're going to call 16 with Jack 10. So bet big there. And then raise Ace 8 from the small blind to the big blind. Always bet this flop. I see some people check this flop because they have a weak ace and they kind of want to pot control even though they're out of position. But just bet this flop. When you check and call, you're telling the person that you have a hand that has showdown, and they're going to be less likely to like give you 2 bets with a 9 or something. And even sometimes they're just you define your range such that. Let me pause because I need to talk about his range right here too. But you define your range when you check a flop like this so well to them, and they're just going to be able to bluff you correctly and value bet you correctly. So it's just a lot better to bet here. But when he bets 26, which is a really large bet, I looked at his stats, and as you can see, he's betting in position on the turn 71% of the time, and that's only over 7 hands, so it's five out of 7 times he's betting in position on the turn. So that means he's probably betting a 9 here if he gets here with it. 50% of the time he's probably betting a 9. He's also floating a lot. If he has 6-7, 7-8, he's betting. And just the size of his bet, it made me think that he either had like a monster, like Ace King, or Ace 9, or Pocket 5s or something. Or he was trying to make me fold. So with that type of polarization and the fact that he's betting so often on the turn, his range is so wide on the turn, I think that I just have to call. And on the river, we know that he's getting here with like 7-8 and 6-7. Well, 6-7 is a straight now, but we know that he's getting here with a lot of hands, so we want to give him the opportunity to bluff again, or to value bet incorrectly with a hand like Ace King. And then again on the river, he bets really, really big, and it just looks like the type of bet that he really wants me to fold. It's like an intimidating stack size, and I decided to call. He had King Jack suited, or the air. And that's an example of what I talked about at the beginning of this video, where people, I hadn't played many hands against Big Shrimp at all going into this session. He's a fairly new regular. And he just decides to float me on that ace high flop and bet turn bet river without any history, without any information to like what types of hands I'm raising from the small blind and how much credit I'm going to be able to give him and stuff. He has no idea that I'm like capable of calling there with ace 8, even if I didn't river 2 pair. So it's just a horrible decision on his part. And a perfect example of what I was saying in the beginning of the video, how people make these assumptions and it turns into a very profitable situation. So Punisher min raises And I decided to go for value with my 9s and 3-bet and play slightly larger pot out of position, but he shoved, so I thought that I was crushed. Because he's never doing that with, not never, but I can't see him doing it with a hand like pocket 5s or pocket 6s or pocket 7s. So it's kind of like the spot before where we were playing against that other short stacker, and I just think it's best to fold. Here I'm just betting for protection and expecting to get called by like a bunch of like king jack, queen jack, a bunch of like gut shots, overcards, king queen, etc. like that. And I expect him to fold like a lot of hands that we beat too. But he check min raised, which is interesting. He might have been bluffing because I bet kind of small, but it's something that you don't want to speculate with right there because you don't have that much equity when you're behind. So it's good to just fold and then try to get a better read against the opponent. And then once that happens, you could start to make more speculative call downs. Yeah, so I took that note on Big Shrimp, and then he's going to be floating the ace-high boards. That's pretty crucial information, and even more crucial information was his bet sizing and his timing. How quickly he bet, and how intimidating he made his bet sizes. He bet 26 on the turn into 32, which is a big bet, and on the river he bet $64, which has a lot of chips on it, and it looks really large and intimidating. Just trying to figure out what level he is on with the psychology of his bet sizing. And there's a possibility that he could own me with that, and then next time bet like 64 for value. But it's part of poker is figuring out how people are thinking. So it's important to take note of it and to have that information, because this game is largely about gathering information and using that information the best. Now I folded ace jack off there, which I'm very proud of myself for. I normally don't fold that, but I think it's a really good fold. Slevin Clevra is a good player, and Raul Paez sucks, but he's going to be 3-betting me and calling me a lot in position and making it hard for me to show down ace jack off out of position. And there isn't any fish in the blinds besides Angry Chinese. But he seems to be fit or fold, so he's not going to be giving me a lot of money. If there were fish in the blinds that were spew crazy or just calling stations or whatever, I think raising ace jack off would be fine. And here is pocket 5s under the gun because the short stacker posted. I think this is fine. Although sometimes with my image and how loose I am, even under the gun, I expect to get 3-bet here by people with a pretty polarized range. That is, they're doing it with a lot of bluffs and a lot of really strong hands, as opposed to a linear range where they're doing it with a wider range of strong hands. So maybe like ace jack, ace queen, ace king, pocket 10s through aces, and maybe like king queen, which would be linear, but polarized would be like 5-6 suited or 10-5 suited or like king 9 suited, and then like ace king, aces, kings, queens. And then here I folded ace jack reluctantly because I really want to see the short stacker bust, but you can't get involved there because ace jack isn't even that large of a favorite against his range. So with EV plus left to act, I think it's just best to fold. And then here I'm looking for 3 streets of value against Can You Read Me, but he decides to min raise us. And I think that the times that we 3-bet this flop and end up getting it in are going to be times that he has like 7-8, pocket 2s, pocket 6s, pocket 9s, or aces and kings. So I elected to just call and to hope that he would bluff the turn and or check the turn and then give us value on the river. So I definitely think that he has a hand like ace 6 or ace 9 a lot here. I think going for value is best, But then the thing you have to ask yourself is, okay, do I want to bet like 39 here and make him think that I'm bluffing? Or do I want to bet small here and try to entice him to call? And I went for betting small, but then the drawback to that is he also can think that you're going for value and you don't want him to fold. So I wouldn't have mind if I bet like really big to try to rep like a bluff. Make him think I was bluffing. But what can you do? So Page drew raises to 15, and it's not a spot that I want to get my stack in all in preflop because I just think that he's really, really tight, and when he raises to 15 with a limper there, that he just has a super, super strong range. But I thought that I could still play jacks profitably out of position and try to win the times that he has ace king, and if I ever flop a set, I expect to stack him the times that he has aces or kings. But he had kings there, and we just checked it down. I would not have liked to bluff any part of that hand because he's going to show up with aces some percentage of the time, and we don't even expect him to fold kings that often. On the side, I would not mind folding there pre-flop, but I don't like folding. I have a problem with clicking the fold button, so I call. But there would probably be a really good argument against this particular player for just folding pre-flop and choosing to not play out of position there against his range that is likely incredibly strong. I hope I raise King 8 suited here because Angry Chinese has almost $300 and is in the big blind. So King 8 suited is going to give us a lot of opportunities to put money in the pot. Good. And to put pressure on him. And also win big pots when we hit flushes. Which is a good hand to play in position, deep stacked. But we get 3-bet. That Mad Dog. Motherfucker. Crushes our plans. So you said the fold. Oh, and I remember this now. Okay. Angry Chinese protects our raise by cold 4-betting. Sorry about not remembering these hands. I actually recorded this video a while ago, and the audio didn't work, so I had to come back here 3 days later. Now, Turtlelicious is never checking a value hand here, like ace jack or better, or, I mean, any jack or better. Maybe even pocket nines I don't think he's checking, because this fish is just so loose and everything. So I decided to bet and expect him to fold like 100% of the time, and expect this fish to fold a lot too. But the fish went and check min-raised us and just owned me, probably with a jack or a flush draw, or ace, rag, or any 2 cards really. We can't call. The reason I like that bet is because I don't expect to win at showdown very often when we check down. When we check this down, because of the amount of overcards and the amount of hands that have equity, I don't expect to win it that often. Maybe like 20% of the time when we check it down. And a lot of the times we're going to check flop and check turn, and I'm going to be facing a bet on the river, and I can't call. But I also don't know whether or not they're going to be bluffing or just taking a stab at it and making me fold the best hand. So I like betting for protection against the fish on that flop and just expecting Turtlelicious to fold like 90 or 100% of the time. And Skitty is folding to c-bets so often here. I mean, not folding to c-bets so often here that I think it's just a clear value bet on this flop. We don't expect him to fold a 10, maybe even like pocket 9s, pocket 8s, etc. He's probably calling the flop with like hands like ace jack, ace queen, and we're just getting a ton of value. But when he overbets the turn, nice hand, buddy. He probably has queen jack a lot of the time. I wouldn't fold ace king if I got to that turn with ace king like that to that bet. But if he bet the river, like large pot or overbet, I would fold ace king just because I think he shows up with Queen Jack just a ton of the time. And I would do the same thing with a set. Because it's just his entire value range is Queen Jack. And that's the value range I'm assigning him. And I don't ever think that he is capable of bluffing like that when that turn card hits my range. Like, hits my entire range. It just crushes it. So he has a bluffing range of, it's like empty. And his value range is only Queen Jack. So the difference between top 2 pair in a set is nothing. And that's always something that you want to consider is when you're facing a bet is, okay, what's this player's value range? And then you try to think of the hands that he would get to the spot that you're in and be looking for value. And then you think about, okay, what is this guy's bluffing range? And then you think about, okay, the hands that he's getting here that he's going to attempt to bluff me with. And then generally, if you beat a wide portion of a guy's value range, it's going to be good to call because you're ahead of his bluffing range and you're ahead of his value range. Here with 9-8, I just let out for protection against Punisher because I expect him to be limping a wide range. But then I turn 2 pair and try to go for value against an ace. But then also there's going to be times where you don't beat any of the guy's value range, but his bluffing range is going to contain so many more hands than his value range that it's going to be a profitable call. And those are spots where the guy's range is said to be incredibly polarized, where they're repping like a really, really narrow range of value hands, like maybe 1 or 2 hands. And those are the spots where it's most easy to make like ace-high calls or calls with like bottom pair or something, where they're pretty standard and straightforward calls, but they look super sick. I thought about shoving into the short stack, but he appears to just be a short stacking fish, and not one of those fucking pieces of shits that grind out 0.5 poker checker big blinds and play like a million hands a year and just like ruin the games. So I let him off easy and folded. Here I thought about 3-betting Holy Poker, but I just don't think he's giving me much respect, and I don't want to put a lot of money in out of position with a hand like 5-4 suited, because I just expect him to be calling on a lot of flops and stuff like that. And then here with pocket 7s, just standard fold. It's going to be really, really hard to play out of position against someone that's that tight. Against almost anybody, really. It's going to be hard to play out of position with pocket 7s there. You're going to be folding the best hand on a lot of flops and getting bluffed off the best hand too often. On later streets, that is. And if you haven't noticed already, I'm opening to 2.5x on the button. I think that's good, especially with regulars in the big blinds. Because when they 3-bet, you're going to be able to call with a wider range of hands and call profitably with a wider range of hands. And I'll play them post-flop. And also try to induce them to call pre-flop with a wider range of hands as a mistake against you, because you want to play in position. Not necessarily with 8-6 off, but with a lot of hands, you want to play in position. And here against Skitty, he min raises, so we're just going to play Jack 10 and try to flop like a straight draw or a 2-pair trips or something and try to stack him, because he's really tight and he does have a super, super tight, strong range, and he's also shown us that he's capable of overbetting and stuff. So we're just looking to flop something large. And here with Queen Jack, we're incredibly happy to bet this flop and bet turns, because we expect him to call us with like 7-8 and stuff like that. And we get the perfect turn card where we pick up more outs, and we can easily rep like the king, king jack, king queen, ace king, hands like that. I'm trying to figure out how often he calls flop and calls turn to decide whether or not I'm going to fire 3 streets. If he was one that was going to not fold the turn bets that often, I would almost always fire the third barrel, just because we expect him to not give us credit for having the king that often. And he could have a lot of like ace high flush draws or stuff like that. Not a lot of ace high flush draws, but you could have those types of hands, or like ace 9, whatever the gut shot, the one card gut shot was on the flop. You could have those types of hands that we want to make him fold. But generally, fish are going to be the players that are going to fold to double barrels most. So that means you're not going to want to triple barrel them, because they're going to have a stronger hand range when you go to the river. And regulars are going to be people that are going to never give you credit. And those are the types of people that you should 3-barrel bluff against. Because they're going to say, oh, Achilles is repping this king. You know, he's getting, with every bluff hand he has on the flop that he's getting to the turn with, he's going to fire this turn because it's a king. And that's largely true. And they should call, but they should also have a good idea of how often I'm getting to the turn with a bluff and betting the turn with a bluff and then betting the river with a bluff. Because otherwise they don't know whether or not they should call turn. And then with pocket kings there, I flatted out of position because DJ Chris knew was going to 3-bet a bunch, and also EV Plus folds to 3-bets a ton, so I was planning on check raising a lot of flops against him. Here, let me just rewind this so I can talk about it more easily. Okay, so EV Plus folds to 3-bets 77% of the time, so that's the first reason we flat. The second reason is DJ Chris knew, I think in the past has squeezed a lot, even though he's only 3-betting 6%, which is fairly high. He is mostly prone to squeeze, especially given the fact that he's folding to 3-bet so often. Next, this guy only has like $80, so we're not laying him immense implied odds in our stack by not 3-betting. And so when DJ Chris knew flats, my plan for check raising goes out the window, because now I don't have the best relative position. And this guy only c-bets 52% of the time, so I like to lead out and try to value town either DJ Chris New or EV Plus, but EV Plus just calls. So then the turn, I decide to bet something like 21, or maybe 25, 23, yeah, because it's gonna give me like a half pot bet on the river, and he's not gonna fold anything. I think betting really large would look a lot stronger, and he might fold a hand like pocket 7s here if I bet really large, or pocket 10s even. Well, by betting small, it looks like I could be trying to get value from a hand like ace 6 or something like that. And I'm hovering my mouse over call, or trying to call as fast as I can. And he has jacks. So I probably would have gotten that in pre-flop N1 had I 3-bet, but I think against his range from the cutoff that I'm going to be maximizing my expectation by flatting pocket kings there and check raising various flops and donking out when it's multi-way. Okay, so here we are. Derek raised and Skitty flatted. I flatted with pocket 7s. Hoping to flop a set. And here also this fish raise from the button, and I flatted pocket 4s, which is non-standard because against most people you should be folding pocket 4s because it's going to be too hard to play out of position. But I just figured because he's so bad, the times I flop a set I'm going to be taking a lot of money from him, so it's going to be profitable. And then here I bet pocket 7s, just because I think Derek is going to be, for the same reasons I bet pocket 4s in the top left table before, Derek's probably going to be betting all of his kings and better type hands just because his board is so dry and he needs to protect them. And Skitty is playing very tightly, so I expect Skitty to flat anything like king queen or ace king maybe, and bet both of those hands on the flop. So he's betting any king, and I just expect to take that flop down a lot. If Derek called, I would definitely be firing multiple barrels. I just never expect him to check call me down with a hand like ace king. I expect him to bet ace king there, and when he check calls, I expect him to have pocket queens. And if he check called flop and check called turn, I'm still shoving the river, just because I also think that if he check calls flop, he knows that his hand looks weak, so on the turn he's going to expect me to bet the turn as a bluff, but I don't expect him to expect me to bluff the river that often. So I'm going to fire the river, especially if a diamond hits. It's going to strengthen my range. And here with Angry Chinese, who's a fish, and 2 callers, flatting 7-9 suited is going to be really good. Has a lot of implied odds, and even though you're the most out of position out of everybody, you're just going to be able to flop big hands like the nuts straight. And here I almost checked, but that would have been a really big mistake. Even though Angry Chinese c-bets over our sample size 100% of the time, I think that we may not have a large enough sample size to know that he's going to bet this particular flop, because how many flops in a sample size of 100% c-bet are like 5 ways like this? It's probably not that many, so he's probably going to check this flop a good percentage of the time. And that would be disastrous for us if it got checked through. So definitely leading on here is good. And we get lucky and get action from both Big Shrimpin and Mad Dog. Mad Dog shoves. So now our dilemma is to call or to raise. And if we call, Big Shrimpin is going to be getting significant odds with any type of draw. So we would be making, or allowing him to play perfectly. I mean, consequently, we'd be making a mistake by not shoving. So I shove, and I don't expect him to fold a set here, but he might fold a hand like 6-8 or 10-6 or 10-8. He is in the big blind. I don't know what's going on here with ace queen, but I imagine I raised, DJ Chris New flatted, and I bet the turn, and I really like it because he's folding to c-bets 53% of the time, and he is just one of those players that loves to fold flops and bet turn with his entire range. So if I check call that turn, I'm going to be getting owned by a lot of like second or third pair hands. So I'd rather just bet the turn with all my outs and stuff and get him to fold those hands. And then I covered up the results here. I didn't even want to see what he had because I didn't want it to affect my emotional stability. But he had 6-8, which was bottom 2 pair, and he did not vote up, so that's good. Dealing with emotions in poker is probably one of the most important, if not the most important issue. Even players that play the highest stakes have to constantly try to improve how they're dealing with their emotions and how they're dealing with tilt, and it goes both ways. You want to not get mad about losing hands as much as you want to not get happy, because you don't want your happiness to be dependent on the results of the hands you play. You want to just sit down and be thinking in-depthly and very logically about the way you're playing, and you don't want any emotions to get in the way of how you're thinking. You want only logic, only cognition, not any type of like euphoric or upset or sadness to affect that. So just try as hard as you can when you're playing pots to not get happy, not to expect to win. When you get aces all in, not to expect to lose either. You should just, when you get aces all in versus kings, for even like 200 big blinds, just be like, okay, I got aces all in versus kings, now I'm going to expect to win 80% of the time, so that means I'm going to lose some percentage of the time. Don't be like, oh my god, yeah, ship the $400, because sometimes you're going to lose, and you don't want that 20% of the time that you're going to lose, you don't want that to affect the other games that you're playing in that could be really, really profitable. So a good way to train your mind to do that is to not pay attention to the results, and that's why I covered up the table. And I recommend doing stuff like that. Because ideally, you want to be able to play your A+ game for as long as possible. And since poker is, for a large part, pretty random, you're going to lose pots, you're going to lose hands. So you have to have a strategy to deal with that. And I folded ace-queen off just because this short stacker is raising from under the gun. I don't think that shoving and getting it in is going to be that good. Because when I get it in, I'm rarely going to have the best hand. And flatting is clearly not that good either. Here I misclick and raise to 8. I meant to raise to 7. So don't read too in-depthly into that. And then here I like over-limping with pocket deuces, just because if we isolate this guy, we don't expect him to fold very often pre-flop. So it's not like we're going to isolate to 9 and he's going to call and check fold a bunch of flops to us. It's more like he's going to check min raise a bunch of flops, and it's going to be hard to show down pocket 2s. And there's also the short stacker is going to ship pretty widely, even though he does have a pretty large stack. And I thought about betting to try to take the pot down and for protection and stuff, but I remember the fact that this guy is really tricky and he's going to be doing weird stuff, so I didn't. Oh, okay, so here I'm pulling up a hand here, because I think I wanted to analyze this hand. So A the Kevlar raises and AKD limp calls. The flop is 8 Jack 5, and A the Kevlar bets $12, which is essentially half pot. AKD calls. The turn is a queen, and AKD bets out $20. And here it was when I wanted to look at it. And A the Kevlar flats after betting half pot. And I cannot think of one very strong hand besides I can't think of a strong hand. I could think of some value hands he could have, like Ace Jack or something, or like King Jack, Jack 10, etc., that he could have here, that he would flat with. But with any set or anything that he was betting half pot to try to induce some kind of like spazzy stuff with, he's definitely raising to protect his hand because of the multitude of draws and like equity that a lot of hands have on this turn. And then the river, AKD bets out $12, and A the Kevlar shoves, and I just cannot put him on anything else besides the flush here, and I wanted to show you guys this because it's just, he's defined his range so distinctively, and it's, as much as I can't think of any other value hand besides a flush, I can't think of a bluff that he could possibly get to the river with here. It's possible he could have a hand like pocket 9s that he called the turn with like a pair in the gut shot. And then on the river, he bet so small that he thought that he never had a flush, and he had a hand like King Jack a lot or Queen 10 or something like that he would fold if he shoved. But it's also important to remember that this guy's a fish, and A the Kevlar is probably never expecting to fold. But if he did get to the river here with a hand like pocket 9s, I would not mind a shove at all facing this $12 bet. I actually think it would be pretty good. But the thing is, sometimes these fish are like donking out $12 here with a hand like Ace Queen or King Queen, and then they say, gee, I have the toppest pair, and my bet looked really weak, so I'm going to call. So then you get owned a lot by bluffing in those spots. But I just think his hand range was very, very, very defined as a flush, like 90% of the time. So here we're going to bet and plan to bet multiple streets because Gyra, as we noted before, with 8-5 suited, isn't folding too many flop bets. But he folds. So we were probably going to fire not an 8 or a 9, because a lot of the hands that are non-jacks that call gain outs when the 8 turn is an 8 or a 9, but any Broadway card we would fire, and we might fire on lower cards to try to get into full non-jack type hands, and any club obviously. Any club besides an 8 or a 9. I'd probably check back those turns just because I don't expect him to fold very often. And I don't want to triple barrel him. I would bet the turn if the turn was a club that was the 8 or the 9 if I was planning on triple barreling. But I didn't have the information necessary to make that judgment call. Because I don't know how often he's check calling me down with like Queen Jack when I triple barrel, and how often he is folding Queen Jack on the river. But I think that is all. I hope this was a positive learning experience. Oh wait, we have pocket eights here. Go bro. This last hand. But I hope you guys learned a bunch of stuff, and I look forward to discussing the video in the forums if you guys have any questions. Oh, so we get 3-bet here. Yeah, it was the last hand. Malo 3-bets to 42, which is just absurd. Expect him to have like a monster hand here. Or a hand, oh wow, sweet. So let's just play this out and see what type of hand Malo is. 3-bet squeezing the under the gun razor with. I don't expect him to ever have anything less than ace king here. Yeah, and he has aces. People at folding will do this a lot. They'll 3-bet really, really large with hands like aces and kings. I don't know why. Possibly because they are scared of getting set mined against. But it makes it incredibly easy to play against them. Because if they're doing that like 10% of the time, you can just 4-bet shove and take the pot down like a lot pre-flop profitably. And if they're only doing it 2 or 3% of the time, you just know that they have like aces and kings all that time, and you can just easily fold all hands that are worse. So I mean, if you're one of the players that is doing that, you should really consider how easy you are making it to play against, and consequently how much value you are losing by doing that. But yeah, there aren't any more noteworthy hands, so take care everyone, and I look forward to discussing the video like I said before.